Welcome to Session 7, Developing Strategies in our Strategic Planning course. At this point, things are going to start to get a little bit messy. You may well think they've already been messy, but this way they get messier. Many books have a nice, straightforward, do your internal audit, do your external audit, do your stakeholder analysis, develop your strategies. A nice, straightforward process, but actually, here things can get difficult. We can see different stakeholders contradicting one another, different processes needing to be carried out, but actually one make it more difficult to do the other, etc. So we'll see a certain amount of conflict development. So what are our for today? We've got 4 straightforward objectives. We're going to look at the TOES matrix. We're going to evaluate how to generate strategic options. You'll be able to identify strategies from your TOES, and we're also going to look at how you will set yourself some interim SMART objectives that will enable you to measure how far you are getting towards your achievements. So what far is the strategy process? Well, we've had a fairly long-winded approach doing it, but effectively what we're doing is looking at this. We're looking at a situation in which we have done an internal audit of our organisation. We've identified what our strengths and our weaknesses. We've also had a look outside, we've had a look into a wider environment around us. We've got some idea of the opportunities and the threats that exist in that environment. And we, of course, right at the very beginning, we've set ourselves up with a mission of some sort, whether it be a set of values or an Astridge mission model or a more formal than that. We've done that. So we've brought ourselves together in these sort of things. And then what do we do? Well, we're bringing those together to create a roadmap, a right direction, a route, where we're going, what our future is, how we're going to get there. And for all that, once we know which the route is, we know what the plan is, of course, what we need is to draw up a formal diary of events, a formal plan of action, a timeline, a scale, if you like, what we're going to do over the next year, next 3 years, next 5 years, next 10 years. We should be aware of the fact that people often talk in terms of short, medium and long, and I think it's very good to do so. But never make the mistake of thinking it's 1, 5 and 10, as in years. That's the default position. In fact, over sometimes the economic development of the very first time strategic approach, the 5-year plans, these were the 5-year plans with the short-term objectives. But equally, it could well be, for instance, if you were planning something as part of an American election at the moment, it might well be that each presidential election is your short-term objective, or every 2 years congressional election is your short-term objective. So effectively what you're looking for constantly is whether to step forward through the next thing. So the short term is the period in which you have things will not change. The medium term is the period in which some things will change, and the long term is the period in which everything can be changed, won't necessarily change. So really, for every vision you have, for every strategy you protect, there will be different ones. So what we're actually doing is we're putting together this plan long-term thing to give ourselves so we can start walking. We can put our pants on and start walking down the road. I mean, once we decide on these strategies objectives, of course, the next stage we need to do is we need to actually start to consider how we're going to measure them and evaluate them and check the quality of them. And that's not this week. That is going to be the next stage that we're going to be doing. We'll be looking at how to do that. So this week we're going to concentrate on putting our pants off and setting off down the road to carry out certain strategies. And of course, should make it clear that this is all part of an ongoing process. So once you've got through this point, we step ourselves back and we go right back to the beginning again. So what sort of strategy are we looking to develop? Well, strategy suggested need to take into account the external issues noted in the external analysis, internal capabilities identified in the internal analysis, and the expectations of shareholders, stakeholders, as outlined in the vision and mission statement and/or organizational philosophy, or statement of values, as we called it. All these inputs need to go into identification of possible strengths, opportunities, strategies, weakness, opportunities, strategies, strengths, threat strategies, and weakness, threat strategies, as we will call them. The meaning of those phrases will be explained later on. The organisation will need to pool all its knowledge and experience, and depending on priorities, the organisation will need to consider what to emphasise. For example, should the emphasis be on organisational development to protect and build existing activities, ongoing development strategies to increase the volume of activity, or on developing new skills and obtaining new resources and new services in order to serve new customers or to diversify the organisation's customer base, or to look at new areas of operation or new countries to get involved in? Are we in an expansionist phase or in a consolidation phase where we would be digging in? A commonly used approach to developing strategy ops is to organise a management team away days, during which managers are encouraged to free their minds of day-to-day management issues and concentrate on medium and long-term strategy issues. Developing a TOES matrix can be a useful tool to shape activities at the away day. Developing strategic options is best conducted in an open forum session, but should be followed by a more formalised approach to evaluation. It's also, of course, as I hope I've argued throughout this course, a good idea to involve people other than managers, other than leaders in these activities. In organisations employing an emergence approach to strategy development is more likely to be conducted in a less formalised way. Strategy will normally be developed as a reaction to external events. In fast-moving environments, this may be the only viable approach. However, large public sector organisations are likely to be more comfortable with a process such as the one I have just outlined. It is very important to remember that. But of course, the reality is, of course, both rational planning and emergent strategy are not completely separate. Quite often we have a rational plan, but we have to be able to react to it. So how are we going about developing these? So effectively, the sort of thing we're going to be talking about here is the TOES matrix. The TOES matrix is quite simply the SWOT backwards. Threats, opportunities, weaknesses, strengths. It is a way of matching resources, internal and skills with opportunities and threats created by external factors. So it is a way of bringing together your external audit and your internal audit to develop 4 different types of strategies. The other things we've done, such as stakeholder analysis, will come into the next stage, which we'll discuss next week, in which we'll start to evaluate those strategies. So we're looking at 4 types of strategies: strengths, opportunities; weaknesses, opportunities; strengths, threats; weaknesses, threats. What would also be clear as do that is that we should be doing this on a prioritized analysis. Your outcome of your SWOTs, your outcome of your pestles, etc., should all be prioritized. We know which is the most important. So having said, what does one actually look like? Well, let's have a quick look at this. Effectively, we start with the internal factors from your internal audit, and we add in, of course, your external factors. We plot them on a matrix, the standard, you must all be familiar with it by now, 2x2 matrix. We put the internal factors across the top. The internal factors, of course, your strengths and your weaknesses. Like I said, you should have prioritized them, put these, and the same with your opportunities and threats we put down the side, and we should prioritize them. So here, for instance, we see strength 1, which is your greatest strength; strength 2, your next best; strength 3, etc. Weaknesses: weakness 1, weakness 2, weakness 3, weakness 4, etc. Remember, it's not just about how strong you are at them, it's also about how relevant they are to what you need. So it's the exact placement on the matrix. It's not are they actually, not only are they strong, but are they relevant? So it's the furthest it is towards the right hand corner of the matrix we produced. For opportunities and threats, it's again something similar. We prioritize them and put them down there. Having listed our opportunities and threats, we then start to develop a series of strategies to go there. We start what we call strength opportunities strategies. This is where we look at our strengths and look at the opportunities available, and we try and take advantage of those opportunities using our strengths. Equally, where we're weak, we look for opportunities. An example of this would be, for instance, if we were particularly bad at something, we may look to merge with another organisation. We may look to get allies who can help us in that area do that, because if we can't do it, maybe we need to find someone who can do it for us. We then have an idea is our strengths to avoid threats. Okay, and a classic example of this would be, for instance, if we felt that there was a danger of terrorism, but we had a strong investigative branch or intelligence branch, we may decide to use that to do that. Or if we felt that we were particularly well represented in a particular area, or we had particularly good talent in communications, perhaps we would, and we saw a threat coming in from a protest, etc., maybe we'd look at our best to invite people in to talk to them, explain things to them. So we use our strengths to head off threats. Our weakness and threat strategies, of course, then this idea is that we're looking at which threats are most likely to exploit our weaknesses, and therefore actually this is a defensive strategy. How can we minimize our weaknesses to avoid threats? The real danger, of course, comes about we see an obvious threat in the environment that hits on the weakness. So for instance, we're suffering protests or disputes in a certain area, and we know that in that area we have very small presence on the ground. What do we do? It could be we pull out of that area, or it could be that we reinforce and double down in that area. So that's exactly what we're looking for. So those are the 4 different types of strategies. Again, we're looking very much looking at things. So depending on the number of opportunities and threats, strengths and weaknesses identified, strategic options should be created for all of these. Some strategies might link to several matches. Only once the long list of strategies created should the organisation start to evaluate, reject and select options. Strategies that tackle a range of opportunities or threats are likely to be looked on favourably in the value approach which follows. So you're looking to bring all of them together, and once again you're looking to prioritise them depending on which strengths and weaknesses they do. How would you actually advise to you to do it when you get together in the seminar? Is to get a large sheet of paper, as you know, from your internal and external audits you did a few weeks ago. You'll have the generated threats and opportunities and weaknesses, strengths. Put these outputs onto post-its and put them in the appropriate section of the TOES matrix so you can reorder them. Once you've done this, you can cross-reference them and you start to write potential strategies onto post-its. Some strategies may actually appear in more than one segment. It's very important, if they do, that you actually write them twice. That reinforces the breadth of importance of that particular strategy rather than doing it. What does one physically look like? Well, as a quick example for you, I have one that was done for the Pakistani State Oil Company. It's an embroic TOES matrix for the Pakistani State Company. Note how the strategies gestures address the specific issues raised by each strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat. As strengths, weakness, opportunity, and threats are added, then strategies can be added to each of the appropriate boxes. Once the matrix is complete, the strategy needs to be evaluated and selected for implementation. So, of course, the problem here generally with some of these is they tend to be a bit vague. So, for instance, we have here Pakistan State Oil Company has a strong financial position, or at least it did at the time of making this TOES matrix, and globalization gave it a real opportunity, with especially the American president of Afghanistan. So increasing supply to Afghanistan would be where we use strengths opportunities. It has strong marketing advertisement areas, so again this would help with penetration, so you can move into untapped areas. Doing that. On the weakness side, it could have high operating expenses, so it could look to increase efficiency in the business process stream to take chance of an opportunity to upstream downstream integration. So if it could actually merge in the supply chain, it might actually be able to reduce some of its costs. A weakness and threat is strong competitors, and it has high operating expenses. Maybe it should benchmark against its competitors and see where it could actually do some things about that. In the end, if you find that actually any of your opportunities or threats and strengths and weaknesses aren't addressed by any of your strategies, then you have to really question as whether or not they should have made the cut beyond there in the first place. So it's very important to look at the different elements of this and to work it's doing. I would seriously suggest, though, only if you look at these strategies, that actually you should be looking to make these more smart. And so I'd also record a small video for you on smart objectives and place another more critical one from elsewhere onto the VLE.